Hi, and welcome back to Josh Cooks Meat. Today, we're going to tackle the king of all sandwiches with the king of all meats, the Pastrami Reuben! In the whole history of sandwiches, there is only one that could be labeled the king. The Pastrami Reuben! And I'm going to show you how to make it, because I love you, damn it. But let's not make this awkward. What makes the Pastrami Reuben so great? Time. In certain restaurants, it takes up to 3 weeks to make this sandwich. But don't worry, I'm only going to take like 5 minutes to show you. If distance learning has taught me anything, it's that I don't have any more patience than that. 3 weeks, you say? Yep. Pastrami, that's up to a 3-week brine. Sauerkraut, that's at least 10 days fermentation. Thousand Island dressing? Well, I'm just gonna buy that at the store. That stuff's pretty cheap. Like my jokes. Now what if I told you we can make that 3-week sandwich in only like 10 days? You can make it if you just buy everything at the store, but then it's gonna taste like crap. And I don't do crap. So we're gonna make some sauerkraut with some fresh cabbage, and I'm gonna show you how to make a 2-day pastrami, because you deserve maximum flavor in a fraction of the time. Fractions? Ugh, sorry about that. I got Common Core on the brain with all the distant learning that I've been having to do. You wanted the king of all sandwiches? You're gonna get the king of all sandwiches. Now let's do this! First, we're gonna take a head of cabbage and peel off the 2 outer leaves because they suck. But don't throw them away. We'll use them later. Now I'm gonna chop my cabbage up. First, I'm gonna cut it in half, then cut those pieces in half, so now I have 4 pieces. You didn't realize there was gonna be Common Core math, did you? Well, if I'm gonna do distance learning, you're gonna do it too. Now we're gonna get the core out. It's not gonna soften up as we ferment, so you can throw it away too. I'm not gonna try and do anything with that thing. Now we're gonna shred up the cabbage. Cut it into thin pieces, because we wanna be able to put it in our mouth. When you're all done, stick it in a bowl. Now to kickstart the fermentation process, sprinkle 1.5 tablespoons of kosher salt on the cabbage and mix it in. Get in there and squeeze that salt into the cabbage. This'll help start breaking it down. It's gonna take a couple of minutes to get it going really good. Then for some flavor, I'm gonna add 1/2 tablespoon of caraway seeds and mix it in. After about 10 minutes, you can see the cabbage start to break down. When it starts to get a little watery, stick it in a sterilized mason jar. Make sure to pour any liquid into the jar too. That's gonna help with the fermentation. Now take those outer leaves from earlier and top off the jar with them, and give them a good push down to get any air out. They'll help keep the cabbage below any water in the jar. Now find a clean cloth to cover the jar. Make sure it's breathable. We just want to keep any dust and debris out while letting the fermentation process continue. Every day, make sure the cabbage is submerged below the water line for proper fermentation. And repeat this for about 10 days or so. Now we're on to the good stuff. Instead of brining a brisket for 3 weeks, we're going to take one that's already been brined for us, a corned beef you get at your grocer. First, take that flavor pack and toss it. We don't need that. Next, we're going to desalinate the meat. When you boil the corned beef, it desalinates in the water, but we're not boiling it, we're gonna smoke it. So we need to get rid of some of that salt or we won't be able to eat it. While that sits, let's get a rub on. Take 2 tablespoons whole peppercorns and set them aside, 2 tablespoons ground black pepper, 1 tablespoon coriander seed and set it aside, 1 tablespoon ground coriander, 1 tablespoon brown sugar, 1 tablespoon paprika, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 2 teaspoons of onion powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of mustard powder. Now it's time to crack the peppercorns and coriander. Get yourself a Ziploc bag and place the seeds in there so they won't scatter all over the place. Now bust out a meat tenderizer or something else to pound the seeds. We're gonna break them up so that they're cracked, not powder. They'll add a nice texture to the meat. Once that's done, mix it all together and set it aside. We don't want the meat sitting in salty water. We're trying to desalinate it. So we're gonna drain and replace the water our corned beef is in. We're gonna repeat this process for 8 hours, draining and refilling, draining and refilling, draining and refilling, so the meat won't be too salty. After about 8 hours, remove the meat from the water and dry off the outside. Now it's time to rub. Because we want the rub to stay on for a while, I'm going to use some mustard as a binder to keep the rub attached. Spread the mustard all over and then the rub. Make sure and coat it evenly. Once we're done, we're going to let the rub sit on the meat overnight to really let the flavors set. I'm going to smoke the pastrami on my Traeger pellet grill. It uses these little pellets of compressed sawdust to cook and flavor the meat. Today, I'm going with a blend of oak and hickory. I'm going to set the temp at 250 degrees. That'll give me a good smoke, and it's not too hot so it won't burn the meat. I'm looking at about 8 hours total cook time for this 4-pound piece. After about 3 hours of letting it smoke, I'm going to introduce some moisture to the smoke using a 50-50 mix of water and apple cider vinegar. I'm going to repeat this step every hour for the next couple hours. Also, I noticed one of the points of the meat getting a little too hot, so I'm going to cover it with foil to protect it from burning and drying out. When I have the color I want and the temp is around 180, I'm going to wrap it in butcher paper. I like the butcher paper better than foil because it allows the meat to breathe a little instead of steam like foil will. You can definitely taste the difference in the meat. I spray in a little of my water and vinegar mix and wrap the meat tightly. I put it back into the smoker and let it go until it hits 203 to 205 degrees. Now comes the part that everyone forgets, the rest. I want the meat to reabsorb any of the juices it was rendering off. I'm going to cover it in plastic wrap it in a towel, and place it in a cooler for a couple hours before I begin to slice it. After a good 3 hours of rest, it's time to slice and make the king of all sandwiches! I just love saying that. Find the grain on the meat and cut against it. That makes for a better, less chewy bite. Ooh-wee! Look at that juicy, tender meat. For a proper Reuben, you have to use rye bread. You know, that bread with the seeds in it. Spread on some of that Thousand Island dressing, a couple of slices of Swiss cheese, and pile it high with the king of all meats, that glorious pastrami you just sliced. Now don't be stingy. You don't make the greatest sandwich in history without a lot of meat. Now it's time to use some of our homemade sauerkraut. Pile it on and add some more of that Thousand Island dressing. Do I give you my secret to a perfect crunchy crust on your sandwich? You're damn right I do! Spread some mayo on the outside of the bread. This isn't for flavor, this is for crust. Mayo is a fat that's gonna make the exterior of the sandwich nice and crispy. Now place your sandwich on a hot pan. To get the cheese nice and melty, I like to put a lid on the pan during this. It helps it steam a little. You're only gonna need about 3 minutes on each side to get it nice and done. See, what'd I tell you about that mayo? It works perfectly. Once both sides are golden brown, take your sandwich off and slice into that sucker. Get ready, mouth. Here comes a royal surprise.
I take the king of all meats to make the king of all sandwiches. God damn, this thing's good.
If you like this video, hit the like button. To see more just like it, make sure and subscribe and hit the bell to be notified for new videos. And be sure to like us on Instagram at Carnivore Kingdom and on Facebook at The Carnivore Kingdom.